What if you were the CISO of the city and have the power to control everything within the city? Wouldn't that be awesome? That's not reality, right? Or is it? Because there is actually a city with one CISO. It's not a city in a traditional sense, but it's a whole airport. DFW Airport we're talking about today. And I'm thrilled to talk today about everything that's there. If you are a CISO of such a huge organization, we're going to learn all about it and all the challenges that are in an environment like this. Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe-Jan Koning, and here from our office in Plano, Texas, we bring you the next episode. Let's get on to it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me introduce our guest of today. His name is Eric Bowerman. I'm thrilled he is here. He is the CISO of DFW Airport. And he has decades of experience in IT, OT, cybersecurity. Most of his days been responsible for anything security in his organization. So that can be a big task to fulfill, big burden maybe. We'll find out today. Eric, welcome to our podcast. The first thing I read, there is a thing in DFW Airport. It's called an OAN, an Officer Area Network. What is that?
Well, what we do with that, the police officers that we have at DFW, they have a variety of sensors on them, and part of that is whether they, pull their sidearm or whether they have their taser or their body cams. We even have rings monitoring health and stress and things like that. So all of those have to stay connected, not only within the officer, on the officer himself, but also connecting back to their vehicle and up through our computer-aided dispatch and such.
So any officer in the that you may see in the airport has multiple IP addresses then?
Yes, basically, yeah.
That's a really cool way to think of this. Welcome once again. DFW Airport. Can you explain a little bit, because we're now talking about officers. I mean, most people probably think that DFW Airport is about a few shops and a terminal and a few airlines that need internet connection, but it's much more than that. Can you enlighten us a little bit?
Sure. So there's 28 square miles basically of DFW. It's bigger than the island of Manhattan. So the airport itself is bigger than one of the boroughs in New York. We do have, a lot of folks that work there. Interestingly, only about 2,300-ish at the airport itself, but about 63,000 doing support and, concessionaires, airline partners, et cetera. So there's a lot of folks that work there. It's 24/7 shop, but we also don't have any residents, which is honestly kind of nice for a city, not having anybody to worry about. No elected officials, obviously. We're more of a board type of city, but we are our own city with it.
Yeah, but city in the sense that you have a police department.
Police, fire, aviation security, obviously, so that they can help with aviation worker screening, as well as vetting folks for their SIDA badges and things like that, so they can get in and out of the airport with the appropriate levels of access.
I imagine one of the few things that sets you apart from a regular city is that you do not have to worry about home DSL lines and stuff.
For the most part, yes. The only ones that we have to worry about now are whether our concessionaires need access, but they on-ramp through us. So we kind of act as an internet service provider to them within the terminals and such.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's an operational nightmare, I would say. I mean, there are so many different. Is there such a thing as a DFW network, for example, like IT network?
There is. So we have actually several different ones. We have our corporate network, which we have subdivided, of course, into different subnets and such. And then we also have, like I said, the concessionaires network, where we run most of the not only concessions but other third parties through that need internet access, but they don't need access into our servers or our systems. So we try to push them onto those. We've also recently released our 5G cellular network around the airport. So right now that's running a couple of the large signs. If you're in DFW, you've probably seen those at either end of the airport. But there are also a lot more opportunities for that, such as IP cameras, that are in isolated areas. Maybe we put those on solar, but they can communicate back through the 5G network. So we're looking at a lot of connectivity options just to try to reduce some of that cost.
Mm-hmm. So that's probably on the plus side. Compared to a city, you control potentially at least control everything that is there on the infrastructure. So it's fiber, it's indeed the 5G and all that.
Exactly.
But I can imagine how, if you're in an organization that's of the same size, then you can deploy technologies like NAC or firewalling, North-South firewalling, all those kind of things. But I can imagine that's harder because there are companies that are not necessarily you, that they have a mind of their own, and maybe they want to connect their own stuff. How do you cope with that then?
So the way we've approached that is, again, we kind of have that isolated network for the concessionaires and third parties, and I won't say it's Wild West, but they can put their own on-ramps, their own firewalls, routers, et cetera, on there. Within our network, we absolutely do have network access control enabled. So you have to have certificates to get on the network. It has to be one of our devices that we manage. Anybody else, maybe they can get on guest Wi-Fi if they haven't done it too many times. So, there are some options there, but we do lock it down pretty tight within the terminals as well as within all of our, Department of Public Safety offices, our headquarters offices, et cetera. So it's we have more control over those, and within the different, I would say, departments within our organization. So each one of those, marketing, we still have marketing, HR, et cetera. They all have their specific needs, and sometimes you have to get exceptions for those, but for the general part, everybody's able to comply with our needs.
What things what operational issues do you have that nobody else has, that you had to find a new way, that invent something new to prevent that a threat from happening in that area?
Airfield lights. So
Airfield lights.
All the little lights that are out on the airfield, they apparently have certain amounts of vibration that we're looking for, and they can only tilt so far one way or another before they're out of alignment and the FAA needs us to go out. So one of the projects that we're looking at is, can we put for lack of a better term, a smart light out there that gauges whether it's vertical or whether it's leaning a little bit, what the degree is. Do we need to go out and adjust it? Is there something wrong with it?
Should be a gyroscope in there.
It'd probably be something like that.
Are those the lights when approaching that the red and white ones so pilot knows whether
on the edges of the runways and such, and when they're guiding the planes to the apron.
So what's the risk then of that, not the security risk here? Because are you concerned about a bird clashing into it, and therefore it's like a health issue?
Yeah.
Or is it more? Are you also worried that hackers get in and then change the tilting? Or
that's the bigger concern that I would have, and not necessarily that they get into it, but they're able to turn them on or off, and that would be more of an issue, I think, than whether they're adjusting the tilt on them. We have to get some telemetry out of these systems in order to determine, is the light bulb working? Is it burned out? Do we need a replacement? Is it need adjustment? But we really try to prevent anything coming in. So finding solutions that help us with that. And right now, this is very, very early stage for us.
Well, let's talk a little bit about it, because we talk to a lot of customers who have some form of OT problem, and generally speaking, OT is behind in terms of security measures. Because it's always been part of the plans, or the physical engineering location, or whatever OT is used for. I mean, in harbors, for example, or in ships, and it has always been like a bit air gapped, right? So people didn't really worry about it, and availability is more important. I'm sure for the airport is the same. It's more important that it's always online. And since it's disconnected, who cares? Because you got to have an enemy that can make Stuxnet for you to get into an offline system. But I can imagine, like you said, telemetry is one. This is more and more connected, huh? So it's not simply. We need to have some kind of IT measures. Maybe also learn from the IT department to apply the same countermeasures. How does this work for DFW?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So we were able to isolate everything like you were talking about in the past, but now everybody wants to have the telemetry that comes off of those devices. And a lot of it is to feed digital twin technologies. So we're able to feed it in, and it's allowing us to help do predictive failures, predictive analysis, or perhaps when we send a work order out for someone to go fix an HVAC, it says, you've got this part to fix, but this other one's getting closer to failure. So why don't you just save some time, replace both, and we don't have to worry about going out a second time. So that's one reason to feed all that stuff.
That's read traffic. Huh?
Exactly.
So you might argue, we'll just read and we'll put some kind of gate in there that only allows data in one, if that's possible at all, but it's debatable maybe.
A diode, you could do it that way. Yeah. I've seen it done with fiber. You just only have the one one-way fiber and you don't allow the other back end so that
so then from a manipulation standpoint, it's still kind of air gapped.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm guessing it doesn't end there for you.
No, we still have a lot of systems that not only do we need to allow them to have that telemetry coming out, but hey, we want to go ahead and have it connect into other systems. So there's a lot of that interconnectivity that we try to work through and try to make it as secure as possible. But we're at the end of the day, we're trying to move passengers, planes, and bags. So as long as we're able to keep those moving, I think that's really the end result. Now, of course, if there's something that we think is just going to be catastrophic, of course, we're not going to allow that to happen. But we do, just like everybody else, have to balance that security versus, the business need. And how bad do we need to get either the data out or something pushed in order to do a change?
On a very operational level, how do you do this? Because in most organization patching is, everybody knows you need to patch your latest things, but those lights, probably really hard to get a stable firmware there. And when do you patch it? So that's not really an option. So there's different countermeasures you need to take. Can you speak a little bit to OT specific strategies that you apply?
Yeah, and I've actually hired someone to do my OT security for me. He's got a lot of experience with oil and gas, manufacturing, food products, et cetera. So I was really excited to be able to bring him on board. So first is hire somebody that knows what they're doing and has a lot of experience. But I've learned a lot from him in the past few months that he's been there even. He's really come in, dropped in, taken control of it, doing the Purdue model and such, which I think you guys have talked about before, but isn't always practical because you can't always have that isolation and that separation. So you do have to figure out, well, what am I going to allow to go between those layers? What am I going to allow to go outbound and inbound?
Yeah, not only that, what also strikes me there is that the Purdue model is layered in the sense that we have, but there's many different products that are in the same layer at the same time. And if we're talking about segmentation from a zero trust perspective, for example, it should be segmented the other way. So all the systems all the lights should be, all the Purdue layers can be from the lights can be in one security segment protector, as we call it. But and we do this over and over again for different systems. The reason is, if one system goes down, then at least there's no contamination into the other one. But that's not compatible with
That's actually what I had. I think it was week 2 when I was there, something like that. It was really early when I joined the airport, but I got brought into a conversation with smart restrooms, and I kind of thought it was a joke, and they said, no, it's a real thing.
Smart restrooms.
Yeah.
Can you explain? That sounds awesome.
It lets you know how many available restrooms are open within a given area. So you can go in and say, oh, I'll just go on to the next one, or no, this looks like it's open. So sounds silly. It actually works. People like it, and it helps in the long run. But my thought was, I don't want somebody, if they're able to get into one of the sensors or one of the PLCs in that area, I don't want it to suddenly be able to pivot to concessionaires or some other type of
the restrooms
device.
Availability not being not in my DFW app is probably not my biggest concern. I'd rather if I can choose, I have one that to fill and not the planes.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So how? But that sounds like a complete redesign.
It's not so much. So with the current technologies that we have deployed for networking, we're able to do the segmentation. Yeah, there are some modifications because in some cases you would have to go re-IP a segment, but in others we might not. We might just be able to split it and say, hey, this is now a smaller segment of IP addresses than it was. So maybe to change the network mask or something to that effect. But we are trying to get more towards, hey, on new projects and such with that are coming in, make sure that those are by design, secured on the segmented network, make sure they're all updated.
So the key point here is that if two devices do not have anything in common, don't have to talk to each other, we make sure it's impossible for communication from one to the other.
Or you can, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it may be impractical. If you only have one widget that does a thing, then maybe it's impractical to make it its own subnet. But maybe groups of widgets that don't only do one thing should be grouped together so that they're all together. But trying to prevent, lateral movements, even on the PLCs and on some of the other OT equipment is really critical. And I think that kind of flows in with some of the zero trust stuff.
Oh yeah, it's textbook zero trust if you ask me. Well, actually, next week we'll have a discussion with Dr. Chase Cunningham, who was really proficient in all this. So I'll ask him what he thinks of the Purdue model when I meet him. Yeah. Okay. So to get there, so the transition you say wasn't all that hard because you could re-IP a little bit without disruptions apparently, and the rest is regular lifecycle management, I guess. So if there's a new version of something, you'll implement it the right way. Is that how you're? So it's a longer term planning.
Well, and to be clear, the decision to do something is really easy because that's easy for me to say, hey, go take care of this. The actual implementation takes a little more planning. Of course, being an airport, we're up 24/7, and we need to make sure that we don't have any disruptions with any of the devices. Now, the nice thing with operational technology is, for the most part, it will continue operating even if it can't connect back to its management systems or the PLCs and such, at least for some short period of time. So even if we take them offline for a bit, we're able to move them over to a 5G network. We're able to move them over to a different network segment. So I think that that's very beneficial for us.
What about detecting what's wrong? I mean, I'll be the last person to say that the first thing you should do, the first person to say that the first thing you should do is apply this segmentation. So, I mean, if you can do prevention, you always should, I think. But there are certain things. It doesn't mean you're never looking what's going on, or maybe there's part of your network that you're less proud of, or that happens everywhere. So then detection is the thing. How do you do that? How do you make sure that the Russians are in, for example, or not?
Well, nation state actors are a little different animal, but for any others that may look for compromise, we have a lot of intrusion detection. We do employ honeypots within our network. We do, with the segmentation and such, lots of internal, I won't say laws, we have internal firewalls. So we're able to prevent certain areas from talking to other areas within that. And if something does move down the chain, we have that layered defense. And I know that that's an old, everybody's tired of hearing layered defense and all that, but
doesn't make it less true.
It doesn't make it less true. That's right. So.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you're doing almost everything by the book. At least the modern book of both prevention and detection at the same time.
Yeah, I agree, and it's nice because when I came in, when you're going into a new environment, you don't really ever know quite what you're walking into. You know what you've been told during interview processes and such. So I, the past few times, have taken a good 90 days to identify what do I need to do, what's going on, is there anything I need to change? What do you keep, what do you invest, and what do you divest? So, trying to figure that part out. And honestly, when I was here, the program was very well built. And the only thing really missing was that OT person to manage security. The folks managing all the OT devices, they already knew, hey, we need to protect this stuff because if these things go down, baggage handling system, baggage reconciliation, then we have a lot of problems. So we want to make sure that all of that stuff is operational. The biggest one, I think, that is visible to everyone is the flight information display system. And that is where you find your gate and what flight, and is it on time or am I delayed? So with those, if those happen to not be available for some reason, we could go to paper, but that becomes very, very tenuous at best in order to get the accuracy that we need.
I can imagine, yeah. To me, the airline industry is always an example of how we should perform in the cybersecurity vendor world. Why? Because there's no room for error. Every casualty is one too much, and honestly, we're not doing a very good job because when I started my job 20 years ago, I thought as soon as there's going to be in the news leaks after leak after leak, then probably people will take it seriously. It's not the case, honestly, because we're numb almost to all of. But I can imagine that also in DFW you inherit some of that mindset of airlines that everything should be perfect all the time. Is that so? And does it make your job easier?
It does not make my job easier.
Really?
I will just flat out say that.
Okay.
But we are considered critical infrastructure. We're the second busiest passenger airport in the U.S., third in the world. So we know that if we have any impact to flights, that has a lot of rippling effect throughout not only the United States, but also with international travel. So yes, we take it really seriously. Now, one of the things that we try to do, and has been more of the mantra the past year that I've been here, has been building that resilience. Being able to take the punch, but be able to work through it and continue forward. You may lose a piece, but is that really that critical? Does it still, are we able to recover it at some point? I think a big point is, if I lose email, does that impact my passengers being able to move from one gate to another, board the plane and depart, and make sure that their baggage is with them whenever they get on that plane. So being able to understand, what are my critical systems? What do I really need to protect? And then the rest of this stuff, yeah, it's important, but it's not life safety, passengers moving, airplanes moving, bags moving. So, those are kind of the criteria we look at for, is this critical and is it a focal point?
But this is actually what I mean, because many organizations would love to have this. But you're saying it's not easier.
Oh,
right?
no.
Because your people understand this, that's how important security is.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got there, we had, there's a building we call the Integrated Operations Center, and they had this really cool display up that has a picture of the airport, and it has all the aircraft that are taking off and landing, whether they're departing, they're a different color than if they're arriving, right? And I saw that and I said, that's really what the mission is. And I think sometimes the team, when I got there, we were kind of doing cyber for the sake of cyber. And, the IT was, hey, we'll do IT stuff. You need more thing, you get more thing, whatever it happens to be, more servers or more network or wherever we need to do it. And the mission was really, I won't say lost, because I know that a lot of the people take it very seriously, but I had a TV put in my room so that I could put that display on, so that when I do have people come and visit, they see it and they go, oh, what is that for? And I said, it's the reminder that that's why we're here, not why we're making a new, application allow listing, or we're doing something else to impact these folks.
You connect the business constantly with the mission and the business with the day-to-day work.
That's right.
How important is educating your employees?
Oh, I think it's huge. That it's massive. I mean, security awareness is alive and well, I'll put it that way. It depends on how you do it. Some people will react well to online training. Some people react better to in-person training. So, and it's not everyone is equal, especially within the city. So with our knowledge workers or our traditional office workers, doing online training, no problem. They can take care of all that. With some of our other folks that aren't on a computer all day long, they aren't able to quite connect why cybersecurity is important to them. So we bring it out to them. One of the folks that we've brought on board, she was able to go out and talk with our fire PD and our aviation security, meeting them on their training times when they were available, on their shift changes and such like that, and make it where it's more accessible to them. So when she's training fire, there are images of the firemen. There are images that they're relatable to. And, she was able to put some really interesting things together for analogies. Hey, this is cybersecurity is related to fire, and here's how. We actually received more compliments from the firemen than I truly expected. They actually sent in saying, this is the best training I've had in 15 years. Oh my gosh, she has to come back and do more training for us, things like that. The really interesting part was I was expecting a drop in their scores, or I was expecting their scores to get better.
What kind of scores?
Their phishing tests. So we do monthly phishing testing. I know that there's a big debate whether that's useful or not, but we do. And they didn't do so well in DPS, but I was amazed by the improvement after going out, having that in-person training, and the delivery that meant something to them. I mean, it's a very significant drop, much more than I was anticipating. I think I just about fell out of my chair, I'll be honest. So yeah, it was huge. And we still have them say, oh, I remember she came out and did this training for us. I'm not supposed to click on things like that. And I get stuff from my chiefs out there that say, hey, I got this, is this one of your tests, or is this something I should report? So
How often do you need to retrain people in your experience?
Honestly, what we've done is just we do it annually, but during the fish, if you fail it, we have a short training that we're trying to go through.
Oh yeah.
We're also looking at some different technologies for that are more human risk based, and I think that is a really interesting way to go. So as they start having behaviors perhaps that aren't really cyber safe, and then it might pop into Teams and say, "Hey, why don't you take this little 2-minute video here?" Or everybody's on their phones all the time. What if we could publish something that's a 2-minute little a video that's more like social media than actual, hey, we're going to do this training. So if we can meet people where they're at and provide that training, I think that's really important and adapting.
Yeah.
The hour and a half long guy that's rattling on and droning on, not useful anymore. Nobody wants that.
Yeah. So you adapt to your public. That's the biggest takeaway, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about, take a level more abstract or more strategic, because what you're explaining is there's a lot of things you actually do, huh? Whether it's user training, whether it's segmenting your network, whether it's, we didn't even talk about patch management or multi-factor authentication, or we could talk for a couple of hours.
NSA everything. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. But you actually, you do this as a CISO. That means that you can actually make an impact on DFW, and maybe that's part of because DFW is really aware that it is so important. Can you speak a little bit on how that is organized in your and maybe also what the role of the CISO should be in organizations like you? And the reason I'm asking is recently someone came up to me and said, "Hey, listen, the CISO and the CFO, they are both in the board. They're not everywhere, but shouldn't they have equal powers then? Shouldn't we expect this? Because if the CFO says, yeah, we're going to divest this, or we're going to not do this merger or whatever, everybody listens because this is the person who knows his finance stuff. Yep. So it's a mandate, right? But often we don't see this with CISOs, that they don't get that. They know what they're talking about. I mean, that's what they're educated for, and that's what their experience is, etc. But it's not, maybe sometimes it's the IT manager or the procurement manager or even the CEO that calls the shots. And I'm interested in your opinion about this. I realize we might be polarizing a little bit because there's many different opinions.
Yeah, there's a lot of different opinions about it. But I think one thing that I am extremely fortunate about, or at DFW I'm fortunate for, is the executive support that I receive. I've taken it as I have to be a very good steward with the resources that I'm provided, not only funding, but also personnel, and just that trust that I have. It takes a while to get that from other leaders because they want to make sure that they understand where you're coming from, how you're going to react in certain types of events and such. I think I've built up some of that political capital at this point, and I've proven that I'm trying to be a good steward with the resources that I've been given. That being said, I have very good support from not only the CEO and all the executives, but also the board of directors. If we go in and we make a reasonable enough case that this is the risk that we're trying to avoid or we're trying to reduce, and this is how we plan on doing it, here's all the things that we've looked at. Here's 3 things we've looked at, 3 different tools or 3 different types of way to solve the risk. And as long as we can back it up, they seem to be reasonable for it. Now, if I go ask for $1 billion, they're probably not going to get it.
Yeah, but then the CFO asks for $1 billion, they will also not get it.
Well, we do a lot of construction. So, okay. The B word is thrown around a lot there. But, for my stuff, I've been very fortunate. Again, I don't have nearly as much to protect as some of the private sector stuff. Some of the businesses that I've worked in, we had a lot of folks that worked there, lots of accounts, lots of machines. When I was at McAfee, we had maybe 8,000 people, but we probably had 25,000 servers and workstations.
Yeah, but you didn't have planes in the air that needed.
But I did not have planes in the air. That's true. But we did have support for airlines and all critical infrastructure. But I think that I've got great support. Now, as far as the role of the CISO, that's one of those huge can of worms that gets hotly debated. The way I look at myself, and I can't say that I am the perfect be all end all or the ideal or anything else, but the way it's worked for me is I started in tech support, worked my way up through a bunch of different positions, I've ended up at CISO, and be careful what you ask for. So you will get it sometimes. But I was able to retain a lot of the technical. I did realize in my last job that I needed to relinquish some of that so that I could focus on strategy and more of that relationship building with my peers within the rest of the business. So I've done that with this job, where I told them, don't give me an A account. I don't want access to anything. If I need a report, I'll ask you for it. Or if I need access to
So
something.
it really helps you both, not only your job, that you have the technical background and the knowledge of what the operational guys actually do, only helps you in gaining credibility then to the board and everything, so they understand that you really know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and it provides that level of trust for my folks. So all of my team members know, if they come to me and say, I think we should do this, I may have a different approach to it. And if I think it's going to be negative, then we'll discuss it a little bit and make sure that they understand what they're actually wanting
better
to do.
Judge of what they're saying.
But I will absolutely back them up. If we do something and perhaps there's a little negativity that goes along with it, as long as we're doing the right thing with the right reasons and we tried the best we could, I think that's the important part. As far as me being technical, I have absolutely tried to embrace the executive office. So. We'll see how that ends up working. But I do find myself falling back into
knowing network routing never gets old. Amazing. Yeah. There's two more things I'd like to talk about. Sure. One is resilience training, because I can imagine if you want to do a practice or practice a security incident or anything, you mentioned several times DFW Airport is a 24/7 operation, so we can't really, I imagine, shut stuff down and then try to simulate an incident. How do you do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Tabletops. So a lot of tabletops. And then we also...
What's a lot?
We do 4 a year. Now, that doesn't sound like a year. Yeah. But it's trying to get coordinated with all of our executives. A lot of our C-levels and senior executives will come to these and at least watch the participation if they're not actually participating. I know that talking with some of the other airports, they run a lot more than I do. They run, at least they said, about one a week, I believe. And I'm sure that they have a few weeks there, obviously, that they're not during holidays and this, that, and the other. But that would still probably be 30, 40 a year. And that's amazing to me. I really have respect for the folks that do that. Now, what we've tried to do is gamify some of it, reduce it to just my team and just cyber, and say, okay, what would happen if we lost this control or that control? And that also plays into our resilience, governance, risk, and compliance folks. They start looking at it and go, oh, we didn't consider that. Or, yeah, we have a contingent plan for this already. Here's the DIA.
So to be clear, what you're doing is you fake practice that there is a certain system not working.
That's
and
right.
Now what? And then someone is prank calling almost. There's a whole line of passengers that can't get past security or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Make it as real as possible.
Yeah, we have a large activity that we're going to be doing for FIFA coming up this year. So it'll be pretty interesting, I think, to see the different departments, including DPS, coming together with us to identify, hey, we have an event going on. What can cyber do for us? How can we support each other in this, even more so than what we're doing currently? So I think there's a lot of opportunity there to work with all my partners and build that trust more. The chiefs over at our DPS, that was one of my focal points, because they felt like they were one of those, I call it an underserved business unit, right? They had a lot of technical needs. They didn't seem to be getting a lot of attention. So just me going over and talking to them, not even necessarily about cyber, but, hey, what kind of technical problems are you having? What kind of technical issues, what needs do you have? How about your firemen? What happens when they get them in the back of an ambulance? Do they log in? Does it take them 5 seconds? Do they need to lower that to a badge tap or something more practical? So, just having the conversations with your peers, getting to know people. Is huge.
So it's more than just practicing in disaster.
Exactly.
It's a constant communication.
Yeah.
Now, there was a while ago, it was the CrowdStrike outage. Most people in cybersecurity have been working nights again. How was that for you?
Fortunately, we, as the airport, weren't affected directly. Obviously, our airline partners were, or at least several of them were. Some of them had to cancel either a big chunk of flights or all of their flights, depending on how many actually came into DFW that day. We were activated over to the Integrated Operations Center, and then we were just calling our vendors as cyber to make sure that they were still able to service our needs. That their cloud wasn't down, or our SIM was still running, or this, that, and the other thing. Our MSSP was working, so we still had to go through our tree and make sure that we were safe, and then be reporting to the CEO at the same time, making sure that he understood what the status was of the airport. Other airports weren't quite as lucky as we were. And like the flight information display systems we talked about, that's how I know that you go to paper, because theirs were down and they were writing them on the big giant Post-it notes to post on the columns and
so
stuff.
it was a real life exercise then.
It was, exactly. And it's something that I bring up to my folks. Let's remember what happened, and how do we prevent that from happening in the future? And if it does happen, do we have the big giant Post-it notes just in case?
Out of curiosity, is there anything you changed after that you can share after this event happened?
Nothing really. We were able to go through it. We did evaluate it, and then decided, do we need to have a different strategy with our endpoint security? Do we need to have, to change anything? And while we already have a couple of different endpoint vendors for various reasons, we didn't feel like we needed to change the strategy at all at the time. Now, we did go through and look at configuration changes, and are we doing ring deployments on all the ones that we do have, just to make sure that we weren't in the same situation where if they did.
Yeah, ring deployments wasn't possible before.
Yeah.
And now it is, luckily. They finally luckily changed it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, clear. Let's talk a little bit about the future. You mentioned digital twins earlier. How does that help you? What are your plans here?
We have an existing one that's more for our facilities, building automation systems, more the operational side, more the operational technology side. What we feel that is going to bring us is that predictive capability to understand when something may be reaching that mean time between failure and could have a negative impact on us. It also gives us, some proactive capabilities of sending folks out and saying, hey, just go take a look at the thing, make sure that this is working properly.
And this is where you have OT and have their metrics, the telemetry in a central system that you can then query there instead of have to do this in the physical world, making sure that if the digital twin gets hacked, that's less of a problem. So then you have more capabilities there.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the IT side, since I've seen what the capabilities are on that OT side and doing that replica, I would like to be able to see something like that for the IT side. Do we have either a twin of the network, or at least some sort of capability to say, here is the version of, the operating system that we're running on this thing, the application, et cetera. What does that look like if we lose it, or what happens if we lose a switch upstream, or a router, or a firewall? And if that's a critical system, all of those things in that chain are critical systems. So therefore, we have to make sure that we patch and do maintenance on those devices carefully, or flop to a backup, or how do we do it?
Yeah, and figure out what is a safe place to start a rolling upgrade, for example, because you understand the traffic and all that, and validate that the traffic is not on this switch before you reboot it, all that stuff.
Yep, 100%. We do DR testing also. I think this kind of goes back to your question on resilience. We actually do live fire DR testing.
Yeah, you have to do it when the airport is operational, huh?
Yeah.
It's scary.
And we're able to. So we're able to flip from one system to a backup system, and then let it run for a little while, and then flip back. So it's my team has done a great job, I think, with that. And I brag on them every chance I get, because of the number they're able to hit every year with that. And it's just increasing.
Yeah. And I always think of chaos engineering here. I love that concept, that where you're deliberately, constantly in production, breaking things, and therefore get used to resilience, get used to failovers, and get used to it. Many organizations are really scared on doing a DR or migrating temporarily to another data center because they need to replace a switch or whatever. But if you're doing it like this, and constantly changing, then it's a habit.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't it? I think Netflix had that with their
Netflix
Chaos Monkey.
Chaos Monkey, killing containers in the network,
yep,
and
exactly.
then the automatic pass.
I'm not to that stage yet. I don't think I'm prepared to go there, but doing the live fire that we've got documented, I'm okay with those.
I know a story about a CTO that went in the data center and would randomly pull a plug and see what happened. Just in production, see what. And that's the physical chaos monkey. Maybe a bit unresponsible, but if you can pull it off,
yes,
I mean that would be awesome. I mean, an airplane for that matter, if a system fails, no problem. I mean, different playbook in the pilot's mind. But
and honestly, that's a great analogy. That's where I've been trying to kind of get us to is, hey, we had a failure. Great, where's the playbook? Let's pull that out. Go through our little checklist. I love checklists, and if I can say, did we do this? Yes. Did we do this? Oh, we forgot that. Great. Let's do that real quick. Oh, look, we're back up. So I think that there's a lot of relation that we have there, just for the checklist with the aviation community and, the way that the pilots know how to handle themselves. So, be calm in an emergency.
Well, let's all look into that and download a few checklists of pilots and see and mimic them, port them to our IT world. I've learned one last subject that I briefly wanted to talk about. And everybody's talking about AI, of course. Is that of any importance to your organization as well? Can you apply that technology apart from the SCSM that summarizes your email and said, I get all that, but specifically for DFW, is it something you're looking into in the future?
Yeah, we use Copilot like everybody. Well, I won't say everybody else, but a lot of other folks do. Yeah. We did publish our policy that basically just says, here's the official one to put DFW confidential information with, or any mention of us. But you're still allowed to go do research with, your other tools if you have a favorite, if you're using OpenAI or Gemini or something like that. So we're not preventing people from doing it because I don't see the point in blocking it. Honestly, it'd just be
they'll do it anyway.
Yeah, you're just going to be blocking a new one every day.
It's like blocking a messaging app.
Exactly. And what's the point of it? So we tell people use it responsibly. If you have questions, need training, let us know. We're happy to work on it. And we've had quite a few requests for, hey, can I use this tool? So we'll go through our AI governance process and say, hey, this looks like it's something that's okay. Here's how we're authorizing you to use that tool. We have built some of our own, again, like the digital twin, where it'll help us with predictive analysis and predictive capabilities. As well as just testing, what happens if this thing goes down? What happens if we take 3 things offline instead of the 2 we're designed for? So I think that it'll help us there. Now, in a cyber perspective, as you know, we've had AI and ML in our tools for half a century. I mean, ever since
it was called differently.
Yes, I know. And we didn't call it AI at the time. We called it Bayesian and heuristics, but
machine learning,
exactly,
deep learning, and all those. Yeah,
but it's been around for a while. I do have some thoughts that I want to try to build up on that, such as, hey, are my policies all compliant with all the regulations that we have to abide by? Here's some gaps. Great, and then go out and keep an eye on those. So when they change, you can say, hey, we need to modify this policy or something to that effect. Now that's a cheesy way to do it, but I think that builds on, hey, here's my vulnerabilities. Hey, here's all the stuff from my CMDB, all of our inventory information. Go tell me where to prioritize these.
Yeah, because a lot of patch management is a very hard thing because you need to constantly do it, and that is not really the same as making a stable network. If it ain't broken, don't touch it.
Well,
but AI can help. Yeah, exactly. Prioritize the things that really matter, because many times you have an operating system bug in a library that it's impossible to get to anyway. So that you are using or plan to use AI for that.
Yeah.
One thing that worries me on AI, and we only see, we've recently recorded a few podcasts about this, actual threats that are new with MCP servers and prompt injection and all that. And it's really scary. And there's a couple of startups that are actually trying to find a solution for this. But you can trick OpenAI or your MCP server. Just for those in the audience who don't know, it's like a building block of AI. You could, for example, the departure times of the planes could be, you could build an MCP server almost like an API that then your LLM could talk to.
Yeah.
But with all kinds of clever prompt injections, I mean, we've seen Kubernetes clusters going down because completely being erased because someone did something clever, and it's really hard to control. It's more of a supply chain problem, actually.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen that too. So I think one of the challenges that we're going through at the moment is just that AI governance component.
Mhm.
What are we going to allow in?
What are your criteria?
It's kind of loose right now. I'll put it that way.
Mhm.
So not one that we really have published out there. So
Okay, yeah, and I know many organizations that are currently working on them or already have them, but it's a challenge to do it because it changes so fast. I mean, if you have asked me what should be in this policy document half a year ago, it's a different answer than today.
yes, yeah, and that's one challenge with government is pushing policies through. Tends to take a little longer.
Yeah, but
than
you
it
need
would
to
with
be
the private
ahead.
sector.
You need to be ahead
Right.
of what the government tells you.
But our current AI policy that we pushed through for all of the board took a while. So we actually updated it probably 2 or 3 times while it was in reviews, and we finally got the last one published. So
Okay, good.
I think we're good there. But again, the technology moves very rapidly, and we're trying to figure out how not to be behind on our policies and such.
Well, if we re-record this podcast in half a year from now or a year from now, we can speak a lot about that, and the world has completely changed. And that's also the fun part of our job. So
Hopefully, we'll talk about quantum with AI, and I think that's really where my head's at because I want to see a lot of that predictive capability. We've actually talked with a couple of companies about quantum computing to see if it really has any play for us, and not really at this point for transportation. I can see where we would have some ideas for it and some potential for it, but I think it's a little far out still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's indeed there's lots to learn in that area as well. And the first thing is of course the crypto anti-crypto algorithms that survive this quantum age. But yeah, we'll see. Luckily, mass production of quantum computers isn't there yet.
And they have to be really cold, and that's hard to come back to.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. A couple of quantum bits doesn't bring you much, but certainly something to look out for. Thank you so much. It's really interesting to have a peek into this big city, DFW Airport, to get a feel for what it all entails, and great to learn about all the operational and strategic things that you're deploying. And I think there's lots for our audience to take away from. So thank you for joining. And to our viewers, thank you as well. Great that you tuned in today. If you liked what you saw today, please press the like button. It will help us spread the word further. Right next to it, there's the subscribe button and also the bell for the subscribe button. That makes sure that next Tuesday you will have our next episode of Threat Talks also in your inbox. Thank you very much and hope to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.